Welcome to Coffee and Conversation. My name is Honorine, and today I'm with Matt Anderson, who is pursuing a PhD in Hispanic Linguistics. Matt, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with a little introduction.
Sure, yeah. I'm from Tennessee originally. I've always enjoyed learning about languages, particularly Spanish. That's what I had, the most access to growing up. I, I always knew I wanted to go to grad school and learn as much as I could and take it, as far as I could go. I came to Florida State in my master's actually, and I finished my master's and decided to continue here. And now currently I am doing data collection for my dissertation. I work with Spanish English code switching, so like language mixing, and I also work with eye tracking, which is like looking at how participants' eye movements are affected by different types of stimuli. And so I've just collected a lot of data, and right now most of my days are just kind of looking at data and figuring out patterns and stuff.
So you said you are collecting data. So how did you how did you gather data? Did you interview people who use code switching, or what did you do there?
Right. I recruited a good number of participants who are code switchers, Spanish English bilinguals who've grown up in the US. And I didn't interview them directly, but we did run some experiments. And so the thing that I look at in my research is ambiguous sentences. And so I look at a particular ambiguous sentence that actually across different languages, there are different kind of preferences for how those sentences get figured out. And so it's different between English and Spanish. And so the reason I like to look at code switching is because it's kind of not known what's going to happen there, right? So with those two competing strategies, I'm trying to figure out kind of what influences that decision or that decision making process. And so I do an eye tracking experiment where participants will see images and listen to a sentence and then answer a question about those images, right? And so with that data, I can kind of see their whole pattern of what they pay attention to and how long they take to figure out that sentence.
It's interesting you use that technique of images. I always thought that it was more a psychological technique. I mean, we see that in shows all the time. They were trying to figure out what's going on in somebody's head and they show pictures. But I didn't think about for like linguistics purposes. How did you come up with that technique?
Right. So a couple a couple things really led me to that pattern or that process. Code switching is often more of a spoken phenomena, so you don't really see it a lot in writing.
Mhm.
And a lot of previous research on these ambiguous sentences that I study are mainly like reading sentences, but I wanted to do it in a more naturalistic way to reflect more how code switching is actually used. And so that's one of the things that led me to these image studies. And actually, a lot of other recent research has used kind of images with code switching as well. They just look at kind of different aspects of it. But
That's interesting. So what kind of images do you show? Is it more like a scene, or it's just I don't know, an animal or an object?
right, so it's mainly people. And so it really has to do with the type of ambiguity that I look at. And so it's always kind of fun to show an example, right? So like if I said someone helped the father of the bride that was by the park, right? And so, like in that example, you would see a picture of the father and of the bride, and the ambiguity comes from who's by the park, right? So it could be the father or the bride, right? And so that's where different languages will vary in their decision making processes. And so what I'm looking at is what images they focus on and what their final decision is.
in terms of what language are they gonna pick?
Right. And so I look at just Spanish, and I also look at just English, but then I also look at instances of code switching too. And so I would look at an example, for example, if it was, someone helped the father of the bride, and then the rest of the sentence would switch into Spanish, for example.
Yeah. So you introduce yourself saying that you love learning, you've always enjoyed learning languages, but you picked Spanish, but do you speak other languages?
I'm working on it. I'm trying to become more proficient in Portuguese. It's probably the second most language that I have experience with. I've taken some classes, always on those language learning apps and stuff too. But I would say that I speak kind of like a low intermediate level of Portuguese. And honestly, I kind of am really interested in learning Turkish as well. I know that that's kind of like from left field, but I've had some Turkish friends in the past, and they've been really cool. And they actually taught a group of us a little bit of Turkish, and so I'd like to continue to pursue that as well. But
It's interesting how you go from the language that I think is the most spoken in the world to one that is is Turkish only spoken in Turkey, or is it spoken in other countries?
I believe only officially in Turkey. I
Yeah.
think so, but
So in your profile, you said that you really enjoy being part of the Spanish table. I think that's how you call it.
yes, yes.
Tell me more about that and about your involvement with it.
Right. So, a few years ago, I was the director of the Spanish conversation table. I did it for 2 years in a row, and it's just a really great experience, because most of the time in our TA responsibilities, we typically teach basic level Spanish courses, and it's really kind of exciting to meet students that are super super motivated and want to keep learning Spanish and are at such a really impressive level, honestly. And then it doesn't feel like a lesson anymore, right? Because you're there to just kind of talk and hang out. And so I owe a lot to Spanish conversation tables from my experience, and so it feels really good to continue that tradition and to help other students keep practicing that Spanish. But it's just really something I've really enjoyed being a part of.
So it seems that for you, being a teacher is more a passion than a duty.
Yes, I would agree. Um, I just I love sharing the value of what I'm passionate about with others, and I hope to transfer that value to them as well, and that passion.
Is it something that you want to pursue in the future? Do you want to be a professor or more a teacher? Sometimes I feel like as a professor, you don't have, I mean, depending on the universities, but you don't have that relationship with students that you can have with high schoolers, for instance.
Right. I think I think I would want to be a professor, but I would want to be in a university that's more focused on teaching and on mentorship. I think I sometimes at the end of the semester I get kind of bummed out because you like you said, you don't get to build that relationship with every student. And so that's what I would want is finding a position that has a very, student oriented mission. I
Yeah.
think I could really be a part of something like that.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years from today?
I would hope to be in that university position that we talked about, like just working closer with students, maybe teaching some different topics in Spanish, maybe some Hispanic linguistics, hopefully teaching some Spanish conversation, something along those lines. But yeah, I would say in a university setting for sure.
How many more years do you have in the program?
I think a year. I think next fall might be my time. So
Next
um
fall.
yes.
So it's yes, it is soon.
A lot to do, but I'm confident.
Yeah, it's sort of confidence, you know, and motivation um in the discipline.
Yes, yeah, you have to have a lot of discipline. Yeah.
Actually more discipline than motivation, because if you rely on motivation, you won't get things done.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of discipline involved. Yeah.
What's your strategy to make sure that you do your work? Because it's harder when you have, you know, about 3 years to write your dissertation. You don't have any more technically you don't have any more deadlines unless you set them up yourself with your advisor. So what would be your advice for a student who is kind of starting on the dissertation process and feel like he
Mhm.
has all the time in the world to write this dissertation?
Right. Definitely one thing that I find that helps is leaving the house and finding like a great place to study or to work. You know, I almost like to treat it as a 9 to 5 where, you know, during the day I'm working and then when I'm at home, I'm at home. Like that's kind of my sanctuary away where I can relax. I try not to work at home. And so that's a big part of it for me. You know, I have a couple places that I love to study. I love to go to Calvin's all the time. And I kind of have some nice areas around campus where I can really get in some work.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was great to know you more and learn about your research on code switching. It's fascinating.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.